Emily Carter's first day at Westbridge University was supposed to feel like the beginning of something grand. The brochures had shown students tossing graduation caps into the air, smiling athletes in gleaming uniforms, and a red brick campus bathed in golden sunlight. But standing there, clutching her warm duffel bag, she felt like an imposter wandering onto a stage where she didn't belong. The track stretched before her, a perfect oval carved into the earth, surrounded by bleachers that seemed too large for her small frame. To the veteran runners warming up along the lanes, she was invisible at first. They were tall, sleek, and confident, their warm-ups crisp, their shoes spotless. Their bodies moved with the ease of years of training, with the certainty of people who had already proven themselves. Emily, by contrast, was still breaking in her second-hand running shoes. The soles were scuffed, the laces uneven, and she knew they looked out of place among the neon-colored spikes and polished gear of the upperclassmen. She tried to stand tall, but her shoulders betrayed her, curling inward under the weight of nerves. Her heart beat faster as she walked toward the track. She could feel their eyes shift toward her, casual glances at first, then longer stares, whispers shared behind smirks. She knew what they were thinking even before the first words reached her ears. Freshman. Who let the high school kid in? Try it. Kid, you'll learn quick. The laughter wasn't loud yet. It was quiet, sharp, and dismissive. The kind of laughter that didn't need volume to sting. Emily kept her face steady, but inside, her stomach tightened. She had expected this, maybe even prepared herself for it, but knowing didn't make it easier. She walked to the edge of the lanes, set her bag down, and tried to focus. She stretched carefully, the way she always had at her small-town track back home. That track had been cracked asphalt with faded white lines, a place where crows perched on the fences and weeds grew through the corners. But it was hers. She had run every inch of it, again and again, chasing a dream that now felt dangerously fragile in this new world. Back home, she had been the fast girl. She had outrun her classmates, shattered small school records, and been cheered on by parents and neighbors who knew her name. They had told her she had something special, that she could go far. But Westbridge wasn't her hometown. Here, special was the bare minimum. Here, she was a nobody. As the team gathered at the starting line for warm-up drills, Emily stepped into place at the back. She didn't want to push forward, not yet. She just wanted to belong. The coach, a tall man with a whistle and a voice that boomed across the field, barely acknowledged her presence. He shouted out stretches, jogs, and stride lengths. Emily followed, moving through the drills with careful precision. But even as she tried to blend in, she couldn't ignore the glances. A pair of seniors jogged past her, one muttering just loud enough for her to hear. She won't last a week. Bet she quits before midterms. The other chuckled. Try it, kid. There it was again, that phrase. It settled onto her shoulders like a weight. She swallowed hard, keeping her eyes on the track. If they thought she would break this easily, they didn't know her at all. The coach blew his whistle again, calling for a short-time trial. 1,000 meters, he barked. I want to see where you all are. Emily's chest tightened. This was it, her first test, her first chance to show she deserved to be here. She lined up with the others, trying not to notice the way some of them smirked when they saw her at the start line. The whistle shrieked, and the pack surged forward. Emily ran. The first 200 meters felt good, her legs pumping, lungs filling with sharp air, adrenaline flooding her system. She told herself she belonged here. She told herself she could do this. But by the halfway mark, her rhythm faltered. Her strides shortened. Her breathing grew ragged. The veterans pulled away, smooth and effortless, while she struggled to keep pace. Every gasp felt louder, every stumble more obvious. By the time she crossed the finish line, she was near the back, chest heaving, legs trembling. Laughter erupted. Not cruel, not loud but casual, dismissive, the kind of laughter that said she was no threat at all. "Try it, kid," someone muttered again. Emily bent over, hands on her knees, staring at the track beneath her feet. Her cheeks burned, not just from exertion, but from shame. She had trained all summer, pushing herself in the heat, running alone while her friends lounged by the river. And yet here she was, already labeled a failure. A coach didn't scold her, didn't encourage her. He simply wrote something down on his clipboard and moved on, as if she were an afterthought. The rest of practice blurred together. Drills, laps, instructions Emily followed mechanically, her mind replaying the stumble, the laughter, the phrase that clung to her like a curse. By the time they finished, her body was exhausted, but her mind was restless. She sat on the bleachers afterward, pulling off her shoes slowly. The others joked, slapped hands, and packed up without a thought for her. For them, it was just another day. For Emily, it was the beginning of a war. She looked at the track, glowing orange in the late afternoon sun. Her chest still ached, but beneath the ache was something else, something sharper, stronger. She remembered the faces of the seniors, the way they had looked at her as if she were nothing. She remembered the phrase, repeated like a taunt. "Try it, kid." Fine, she thought. She would try. She would try harder than they imagined. She would try when no one was watching, when the stadium lights were off and the track was silent. She would try until the phrase wasn't a joke anymore, but a legend. Emily Carter rose from the bleachers, laced her shoes tighter, and walked back onto the track. The others had gone home, but she wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Not when there was work to do. She jogged to the start line, breathing in the cooling air, and whispered to herself, "Try it, kid." This time, it wasn't mockery. It was a promise. And with that, she began to run. The second week at Westbridge should have been easier for Emily. She knew the layout of campus now, had memorized the walk from her dorm to the athletic center, and had started to recognize the faces of her teammates. Yet each morning when she laced up her shoes, dread crept in. The track was no longer a place of possibility. It had become a stage where laughter lingered like an echo. The first stumble during that opening trial had branded her, and the veterans wasted no time sharpening it into a weapon. "Try it, kid." It came from everywhere now. If she missed a step during drills, the phrase drifted across the lanes. If she lagged on long runs, someone would toss it over their shoulder like a bone to a dog. Even during weight training, when she strained at the squat rack, the chuckles followed. "Try it, kid. Don't break yourself." The words themselves weren't the worst part. It was the way they were said. Not angry, not even cruel, but casual, dismissive. She wasn't worth being hated. She was worth being mocked. Emily told herself she didn't care. She smiled when she heard it, even forced out a small laugh once, trying to seem like she was in on the joke. But inside, every repetition dug deeper, chiseling at her pride. By the end of practice each day, her body ached less than her spirit. The veterans carried themselves like kings of the track, and why shouldn't they? They had the records, the medals, the newspaper clippings, framed in the athletic office. To them, freshmen were obstacles, or, at best, background noise. And Emily, with her quiet nature and unpolished stride, had become the perfect target. One rainy afternoon, the team gathered for intervals. The sky was gray, the track slick with drizzle. The coach barked out the planned 10 repeats of 400 meters, each faster than the last. Emily felt her stomach knot. Intervals had always been her weakness. Her endurance was stronger than her sprinting speed. They lined up. The whistle blew. Feet pounded the wet ground. Emily surged forward, trying to stay with the middle pack, But by the second lap she slipped, her foot skidding on the slick curve. She didn't fall, but her stumble was obvious. "Try it, kid," someone shouted, laughter bubbling in its wake. Emily's cheeks burned. She pushed harder, lungs screaming, but the harder she tried, the more clumsy she felt. Each interval was worse than the last. By the end, she was soaked in rain and shame, trailing behind the group. As they jogged their cool-down, 2 juniors ran alongside her, smirking. "You know, you don't have to kill yourself out here," one said. "Yeah," the other added. "Nobody's expecting much from you. Maybe stick to jogging clubs." They laughed, high-fived, and sprinted ahead. Emily slowed, staring at their backs. For a moment, doubt crashed over her. Maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't belong here. Maybe she was just a girl from a small town with small dreams, foolish enough to think she could run with champions. But then she remembered the faces of her parents the day she'd left home. Her mother had hugged her tight, whispering, "You've worked too hard to give up now." Her father had clapped her on the shoulder, saying, "Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do." She clenched her fists. She couldn't go back with stories of quitting. Not after everything she'd promised. That night, lying in her narrow dorm bed, the phrase looped in her mind, "Try it, kid," over and over like a taunt. But slowly, it began to twist, to reshape itself. What if it wasn't mockery? What if it was a challenge? Fine, she thought. I'll try. I'll try harder than any of them. The next morning, Emily showed up early. The track was empty, dew glistening on the lanes. She jogged slowly, warming her body, then launched into sprints. She pushed herself until her lungs felt like fire, until her legs wobbled beneath her. She collapsed on the grass, gasping, but she smiled through the pain. This was hers. No laughter, no whispers, just her and the track. For the next 2 weeks, she repeated the ritual. Mornings before classes, evenings after practice. Sometimes she fell asleep in lectures, head heavy with exhaustion, but she didn't care. She was building something invisible, something none of them could see yet. Still, the mockery didn't stop. During a long run, a senior jogged past her, pretending to stumble dramatically. "Careful, kid. Don't fall again." The group laughed. During weight training, when she couldn't match the heavier lifts, someone grunted exaggeratedly beside her, mimicking her strained face. "Try it, kid." And during a team meeting, when the coach asked who wanted to volunteer for an extra endurance test, silence filled the room until someone pointed at her. "Let the freshman try it." More laughter. Emily's jaw tightened, but she raised her hand anyway. "I'll do it." The room quieted for a second, surprised by her boldness. The coach scribbled her name down and moved on. The laughter resumed, but it was softer now, tinged with uncertainty. That night, Emily wrote in her notebook, "They want me to try? Good, let them watch me." A doubt still lingered. Alone in her dorm, she stared at the ceiling, her muscles aching, her mind restless. Was she enough? Could she really turn the laughter into fuel? Or was she just fooling herself? On Friday, after practice, she overheard a group of seniors talking. "She's gonna burn out," one said. "Yeah, she doesn't have it." Freshman hype. Try it. Kid then quit like the rest. Emily slipped away before they saw her, their voices echoing in her head. She walked to the track, the sky darkening, stadium lights flickering on. She stood at the start line, staring down the lanes that had humiliated her again and again. Her legs trembled, but not from fear, from resolve. They could laugh. They could mock. But she would not break. Emily bent down, touched the white line with her fingertips, and whispered the phrase they had thrown at her like an insult. "Try it, kid." Only this time, it wasn't their voice. It was hers. And she ran. The track was silent at dawn, except for the faint hum of cicadas and the distant rumble of a maintenance truck. Mist clung to the grass, curling over the lanes like a veil, and Emily Carter stood alone at the starting line. Her breath formed pale clouds in the cool morning air. The stadium that had once mocked her was empty now. No laughter, no sneers. Just her, the track, and the sound of her heartbeat in her ears. She glanced at her watch. 5:12 a.m. Most of her teammates were still asleep. Some wouldn't rise for hours, not until the official practice. But Emily had decided weeks ago that her training couldn't start and end with the team schedule. If she was going to rise from try-it kid to something greater, she would have to carve her own path. She began with a jog, her legs stiff from the previous day's drills. The first lap always felt heavy, like running with weights strapped to her ankles. But as she settled into rhythm, her body loosened, her breath steadied, and the track became her ally instead of her judge. She circled once, twice, 3 times, until the rhythm lulled her doubts into silence. This was her ritual now, rising before sunrise, training alone, then showing up to official practice hours later as if she hadn't already put in the work of champions. Nobody knew. Nobody saw. And maybe that was the point. She didn't need their applause, she needed her own grit. After her warm-up, she sprinted. Short bursts at first, 50 meters at a time, her shoes slapping against the wet surface. She counted the seconds, then walked the recovery, then sprinted again. By the 6th rep, her lungs burned, but she forced herself through the 7th, then the 8th. Her notebook lay on the bleachers, a page half filled with scribbles, lap times, distances, adjustments. She wrote everything down, not because anyone would read it, but because the numbers told the story of her persistence. By the time the sun broke the horizon, Emily was drenched in sweat. She collapsed onto the grass, chest heaving, the world spinning. For a moment, she lay still, watching clouds drift overhead, feeling both utterly drained and fiercely alive. Then she sat up, pulled the notebook onto her knees, and wrote, "Sprints better. Still slow at start. Fix form. Tomorrow, longer reps." She knew improvement wouldn't come overnight. It would come in layers, invisible at first, buried beneath soreness and exhaustion. But she believed in accumulation, the idea that small steps repeated daily could stack into something mighty. Her teammates never suspected the truth. At official practice, she blended in, quiet and focused. They still laughed when she lagged during speed work, still muttered, "Try it, kid," when she stumbled. She let them. They saw only the surface, the freshmen who couldn't quite keep up. They didn't see the extra miles, the notebooks filling with scribbles, the mornings when her alarm cut through dreams at 4:45 a.m. One evening, after a grueling endurance session, Emily stayed behind as the others left. Her legs screamed with fatigue, but she set up cones on the track and ran drills until the sky darkened. As she finished, sweat dripping into her eyes, she noticed a janitor leaning on his broom, watching. He gave a small nod. "Don't see many kids out here this late," he said. Emily smiled weakly. "Guess I've got catching up to do," the janitor chuckled. "Or maybe you're the only one running far enough ahead." The words stayed with her long after he left. Her body began to change with the weeks. The freshman who had gasped for air during short trials now found herself holding steady through longer runs. Her legs grew stronger, her lungs more efficient. She studied technique videos late at night, mimicking the form of professional runners in her dorm mirror. She adjusted her stride, tested different breathing rhythms, experimented with recovery routines. It wasn't glamorous. Often, it was lonely. There were mornings when her alarm felt like an enemy, when her muscles begged for rest, when she questioned whether it was worth it. Some days she broke down mid-run, tears mixing with sweat, whispering to herself, "Why are you doing this?" But each time the answer came, "Because you can." One Saturday, she decided to test herself. She set her watch for 4,000 meters, the distance that haunted her, the one her teammates assumed she couldn't handle. The track was empty, the world still half asleep. She began with cautious strides, pacing herself carefully. Lap after lap, she kept her rhythm, ignoring the fatigue clawing at her legs. By the final lap, she was staggering, every muscle begging to quit. But she didn't. She crossed the line with a cry, collapsing to the ground, her chest exploding with pride. She'd done it alone, unseen, but undeniable. That night, she wrote in her notebook, 4,000 meters. Completed, not fast yet. But I can finish. One belonged here. Her silent training began to ripple into practice. During team runs, she stayed closer to the middle pack instead of lagging at the back. During drills, her form looked sharper, her endurance stronger. The veterans still teased her, but some of their laughter had lost its bite. They didn't know why she was suddenly steadier. They assumed luck or chance. Only Emily knew the truth. It was the mornings, the nights, the lonely miles no one else dared to run. One afternoon, as she finished a steady 5K with the team, she overheard a senior mutter, the kid's not dropping off like before." It wasn't praise, but it was enough. Her hunger grew. Each small gain fueled her to push harder. She began cross-training in the gym, lifting light weights to strengthen her core and legs. She started journaling not only lap times, but also feelings, noting when she felt strong, when she faltered, and what fueled her best runs. Slowly, a portrait of her progress took shape across the pages. But she kept it quiet. She didn't announce her early mornings or her late nights. She didn't correct her teammates when they laughed. She let them believe she was the same clumsy freshman, because someday, when the moment came, she wanted their shock to be absolute. The silence became her ally. In silence, she could fail without judgment. In silence, she could experiment and rebuild. In silence, she could craft the transformation that would one day demand their respect. And as she stood alone at the track one evening, the sky painted with streaks of orange and purple, Emily whispered the words again. "Try it, kid." They no longer sounded like mockery. They sounded like prophecy. The mornings had become Emily's sanctuary. While most of campus slept, she carved out her own world on the track lap after lap, sprint after sprint, scribbling notes in her battered notebook. She thought she was alone in this ritual, invisible to the world. But one morning in late September, she realized she wasn't. It was barely dawn. Mist clung to the grass, and Emily was halfway through a set of 800-meter repeats, lungs burning, legs threatening to give way. As she rounded the curve for her final rep, a voice called out from the bleachers. "Your arms are all over the place, kid." Emily staggered to a stop, startled. On the bleachers sat an older man in a faded Westbridge cap, a paper coffee cup steaming in his hand. He wasn't one of the current coaches. She'd have recognized him. His hair was silver, his posture straight, and his eyes, though weathered, carried a sharpness that made her feel like he'd been watching every step. Sorry," Emily managed, brushing sweat from her forehead. "Don't be sorry," the man said, standing slowly. He walked to the edge of the track with measured steps, like someone who had lived 1,000 mornings on these lanes. "Be efficient. Your arms are wasting energy. You're running like you're fighting the track instead of flowing with it." Emily blinked. Nobody had ever spoken to her like that here. Her teammates mocked. The coach barely noticed her, but this stranger sounded invested. "Who are you?" she asked cautiously. The man smirked. "Name's Coach Reynolds. Used to run this program a long time ago. Retired now. But I live nearby." Sometimes I come to see if the track remembers me. Emily's eyes widened. She'd heard whispers about Reynolds, a legend at Westbridge, the man who'd once coached champions to national titles before stepping down years ago. His name was etched on a plaque in the athletic building, but she'd never imagined meeting him here at dawn. He studied her for a moment, then pointed at her notebook lying open on the bleachers. "Yours?" Emily nodded. Reynolds picked it up, flipping through the pages filled with scribbled times and notes. "You've been working," he said, his tone unreadable. Heat rose in Emily's cheeks. "I'm trying," she admitted. Reynolds gave a short laugh. "Trying's not bad. Most kids don't even do that much." He handed the notebook back, then fixed her with a look. "But trying alone won't cut it. You want to get better? You need precision, discipline, smarter effort, not just more effort." Emily hugged the notebook to her chest, unsure what to say. For weeks she'd been grinding in silence, fueled by stubbornness alone. And now, suddenly, here was a man who spoke like he could see straight through her determination and her flaws. Reynolds sipped his coffee, then gestured at the track. "Run one more rep." "Show me." Emily hesitated. Her body screamed for rest, but something about the authority in his voice compelled her. She nodded, tightened her laces, and stepped to the line. "Remember," Reynolds called, "relax your arms. Let them drive your rhythm, not fight it." She took off. The first 100 meters felt awkward as she tried to adjust, but then she found a smoother rhythm, her arms swinging closer to her sides, her body leaning forward slightly. It wasn't perfect, but it felt different, lighter. When she finished, gasping, Reynolds nodded. "Better." Still raw, but better. Emily bent over, hands on her knees, and managed a breathless, "Thanks." Reynolds shrugged. "Don't thank me yet. If you're serious about this, I'll be around. Early mornings. Not here to coddle you if you're lazy. I'll walk away. But if you want guidance..." He left the sentence unfinished, letting it hang in the cool morning air. And just like that, he turned and walked toward the exit, leaving Emily standing in the middle of the track, stunned. Over the next week, he kept showing up. Always early, always with coffee in hand, watching from the bleachers. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes he didn't. When he did, his advice cut sharp. "Your stride's too long. You're wasting energy. You're landing heavy. Think spring, not stomp. Don't stare at your feet. Eyes up. Own the track." At first, Emily felt self-conscious, but gradually she realized he wasn't there to mock. He was there to shape. And for the first time at Westbridge, she felt like someone actually saw her not as a joke, not as an afterthought, but as a runner worth molding. Their routine became unspoken. She trained. He observed. She logged notes. He corrected. One morning, he handed her a small stopwatch. "Timing's your friend. Don't run blind. Know your splits. Control your pace. You don't win by running harder. You win by running smarter." Emily clutched the stopwatch like it was treasure. "Thank you," Reynolds shrugged. "Don't waste it." She didn't. With his guidance, her training sharpened. Her notebook grew more detailed: lap times, heart rate estimates, notes on form. She began to see patterns in her performance, to understand not just how to run, but why she was running the way she was. And Reynolds wasn't only technical sometimes. He dropped words that struck deeper. "Running's not about beating others," he told her one misty morning. "It's about beating yesterday's version of yourself. Do that enough times, and no one will touch you." Emily carried those words with her like armor. Her teammates noticed small changes. During practice, Emily's strides looked smoother, her breathing steadier. She didn't collapse at the end of runs anymore. She held her ground. The whispers of "try it, kid" didn't stop, but some of the mockery shifted into puzzled glances. One afternoon, as the team finished a set of 200-meter sprints, a junior muttered, "When did she get so consistent?" Emily pretended not to hear, but inside, she smiled. She never told them about Reynolds. He was her secret weapon, her quiet mentor in the shadows. And she liked it that way. Let them underestimate her. Let them laugh. The less they saw coming, the sweeter the shock would be. But Reynolds wasn't easy. If Emily faltered, he called her out. One morning, after she cut a rep short out of exhaustion, he barked from the bleachers. "Quitting's a habit, Carter. You want to carry that into every race?" Shame burned through her, and she pushed herself harder the next day. Yet he also knew when to push differently. Once, when Emily showed up limping slightly from overtraining, Reynolds shook his head. "Rest is training too. Burn yourself out, and you'll prove the mockers right." He ordered her to take 2 days off, and though it killed her pride, she listened. As October rolled in, Emily felt a shift within herself. She was no longer just surviving practices, she was improving. Her times in silent sessions dropped steadily. Her confidence, once fragile, grew roots. One morning, after a particularly strong set of intervals, Reynolds stood and clapped once. "You're not the same kid who stumbled on her first trial," he said. Emily's chest swelled, but she only whispered, "Not yet where I want to be, though." Reynolds smiled faintly. "Good. Never be satisfied. But remember this. Every laugh you hear out there, they don't matter. What matters is whether you can look in the mirror and say, 'I did everything I could.'" Emily nodded, gripping her stopwatch. She thought of the voices still knocking her, still doubting her. She thought of the phrase, "Try it, kid," echoing like a ghost. She knew then that she wasn't running just to silence them. She was running to prove something to herself. And with Reynolds' guidance, she was closer than ever to becoming the runner she'd always dreamed she could be. That night, Emily opened her notebook and wrote 3 words in bold letters across a fresh page. Not alone anymore. For the first time since stepping onto Westbridge's track, she felt the weight of isolation lift. She had a mentor now. She had direction. And with both, the laughter around her began to sound less like a curse and more like background noise fading, irrelevant, destined to be drowned out by her strides. The announcement came on a windy Thursday afternoon. Practice had barely started when Coach Harris blew his whistle, the sharp sound cutting across the field. "Listen up," he barked, pacing in front of the group. "We're scheduling a 4,000-meter trial run for next Friday. I want to see where you all stand in endurance before we finalize lineups for the fall meets. This isn't optional. It's the proving ground. Treat it like a race." The team groaned collectively. 4 kilometers 10 laps around the track wasn't a distance they ran often in practice. It required pacing, patience, and stamina. Most of them thrived on shorter intervals, not grinding endurance. Emily froze in place, her pulse quickening. A 4,000-meter trial. This was it. This was the moment she'd been silently training for. The invisible hours and brutal mornings distilled into one test. But around her, the whispers began again. Perfect chance to watch the freshman drop out. She'll last maybe 2 laps. Bet she can't even make it halfway. The laughter was quieter than before, less cruel, more uncertain, but it was still there. And it stung. Emily clenched her jaw and bent down to retie her laces, pretending not to hear. Inside, though, her determination solidified like concrete. Let them laugh now, she thought. Next Friday, I'll make them eat those words. That evening, Emily stayed after practice, alone on the track as the sun dipped low. She ran 3 sets of 1,200 meters, focusing on pace control, exactly as Reynolds had taught her. When she finally staggered to a stop, sweat dripping, she noticed him sitting quietly in his usual spot on the bleachers. You heard about the trial, Reynolds said. Emily nodded, gulping water. They think I'll fail. They always will, Reynolds replied. That's the easy bet. But the question is, do you believe them? Emily hesitated, then shook her head firmly. No. A rare smile crept across Reynolds's face. Good. Then let's make sure they're wrong. The next week blurred into a storm of preparation. Reynolds tailored her workouts specifically for the 4,000-meter steady-state runs, pacing drills, controlled breathing exercises. He drilled into her the importance of splits. Start too fast, and she'd burn out. Too slow, and she'd never catch up. Patience is your weapon, he told her. Don't let adrenaline trick you. Run your race, not theirs. Emily took it to heart. Each morning, she rehearsed the trial in her head, how she'd start, when she'd settle, how she'd surge in the final laps. At night, she scribbled notes furiously in her journal. Lap 3 focus on rhythm. Lap 6 check breathing. Lap 9 lean into the pain. Don't run from it. She wasn't just training her body anymore. She was training her mind. The night before the trial, Emily barely slept. She lay awake in her dorm, the phrase, "Try it, kid," echoing in her skull like a drumbeat. Only this time, the words didn't sting. They fueled her. By dawn, she was on the track, running 2 easy laps to loosen up. Reynolds was waiting, as always. He didn't give her a lecture that morning, just handed her a small folded piece of paper. "What's this?" Emily asked. "Read it after the trial," he said. "Not before. Focus on the run." Emily tucked it into her bag, curiosity gnawing at her, but she obeyed. When Friday arrived, the trial had the air of a small event. The team gathered, some joking nervously, others stretching in silence. A few professors and classmates lingered in the stands, curious to watch. Word had spread. The freshman who'd been the butt of jokes all semester was about to face her reckoning. Emily warmed up on the infield, headphones in, shutting out the noise. She repeated Reynolds's words in her mind like a mantra. Patience, rhythm, your race. Coach Harris gathered them at the starting line. 10 laps, he said. No shortcuts, no excuses. Run hard, run clean. Clock starts when the whistle blows. Emily glanced down the line. Her teammates towered over her, tall, lean, experienced. They looked relaxed, confident. She felt small beside them, but instead of shrinking, she straightened her shoulders. She wasn't here to match their swagger. She was here to prove her grit. The whistle pierced the air, and they were off. The pack surged forward, feet pounding the track. Instantly, several runners sprinted ahead, eager to set the tone. Emily resisted the urge to chase. She'd rehearsed this moment. She tucked herself into a steady pace, eyes fixed ahead, breathing measured. By the second lap, the front runners had already strung out, their strides long and aggressive. The middle group jostled for position, muttering curses as elbows brushed. And behind them, Emily held her ground, not last, but not far from it. She's already falling back, someone whispered from the stands. Reynolds, sitting quietly in the bleachers, didn't flinch. He simply checked his watch, nodding to himself. Lap 3. Emily locked onto her rhythm. Her arms swung smoothly, her stride efficient. She heard laughter ripple from the sidelines, but let it wash over her. In her head, she ticked off Reynolds's checklist. Relax shoulders. Breathe deep. Don't fight the track. By lap 5, something shifted. The early sprinters began to fade, their breathing ragged. The middle group lost shape, runners peeling off pace. And Emily, steady, unhurried Emily, was still holding her line. Whispers replaced laughter. Wait. She's not slowing down? How is she still steady? On lap 7, Emily felt the first wave of pain crash into her legs. her lungs screaming for relief. Panic threatened, but she shoved it aside. This was the wall Reynolds had warned her about. She repeated his words. Lean into the pain. Don't run from it. She leaned in. By lap 8, she was passing people one, then another. Each stride fueled her resolve. The same teammates who had once laughed now wore expressions of disbelief as she surged past. On lap 9, the stadium grew tense. Emily was no longer the freshman sideshow. She was in the mix. The mockers had gone silent. Her legs burned, her vision narrowed, but she pushed harder. She could hear Reynolds's voice in her head. Your race. Finish it your way. The bell rang for the final lap. Emily gritted her teeth and drove forward, every ounce of training pouring into the track. The crowd roared as she overtook 2 more runners, sprinting the last 200 meters with everything she had. When she crossed the finish line, gasping, nearly collapsing, she realized she wasn't at the back. She wasn't even in the middle. She'd finished near the front. Silence hung for a moment, heavy and stunned. Then the whispers started again, only different this time. She actually did it. No way. She crushed it. The freshman. Emily lay on the track, chest heaving, tears stinging her eyes, not from pain, but from release. For the first time since stepping onto Westbridge's track, she wasn't just surviving. She belonged. From the bleachers, Reynolds stood slowly, a small smile tugging at his lips. He didn't cheer, didn't shout. He simply nodded, as if to say, I knew you could. Later, as the crowd dispersed and Emily packed up her bag, she remembered the folded paper Reynolds had given her. Hands trembling, she opened it. In neat handwriting, it read, They'll laugh until you run. Then they'll remember your name. Emily pressed the note to her chest, a fierce smile breaking across her face. The nickname Try It, Kid, would never sound the same again. The day after the trial, the air around the Westbridge track felt different. The same teammates who once smirked at Emily now studied her with cautious eyes, like they weren't quite sure who she was anymore. For weeks she had been the freshman joke, the butt of whispered bets and sidelong laughs. But now those same whispers had twisted into something else, curiosity, unease, even respect. Emily noticed it the moment she stepped onto the infield. Conversations hushed when she passed. Heads turned during warm-ups. No one said it aloud, but she could feel the question hanging heavy in the air. Was her trial a fluke? Or was she really that good? Coach Harris gave nothing away. He simply jotted her time on the clipboard and moved on, his usual stern expression unmoved. But when Emily glanced over, she caught him staring a beat longer than usual. That was enough. For the first time since joining the team, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. That evening, Emily met Reynolds on the bleachers, her notebook clutched in her hands. You did it, he said simply, sipping his coffee. Emily shook her head, still processing the run. I didn't win, Reynolds chuckled. Winning isn't about the finish line yet. It's about turning doubters into believers. And yesterday, you did exactly that. Emily looked down at her notebook, flipping to a fresh page. It felt different out there. Like everything we've been working on finally clicked. My body hurt, but I wasn't panicking. I knew I could keep going. Reynolds nodded. That's called control. Most runners fear pain. The great ones learn to run with it. Yesterday, you broke through that wall. His words sank deep. A breakthrough. That was what it felt like. Something inside her had shifted permanently. She wasn't just trying anymore. She was becoming. The next week of practice only confirmed it. Emily's strides were sharper, smoother. Her times and intervals dropped. Even her posture carried more confidence. During a set of 400-meter repeats, she pushed past 2 juniors who had always dominated the middle pack. They didn't laugh this time. They glanced at her, wide-eyed, and quickened their pace to keep up. Afterward, as they cooled down, one of them muttered, "Not bad, Carter." It wasn't exactly praise, but to Emily, it felt like gold. But breakthroughs weren't just physical. They were mental. For the first time, Emily didn't dread practice. She craved it. She began staying late, running extra laps not because she needed to prove herself, but because she loved the rhythm, the freedom. Each stride felt like a piece of her old doubts falling away. At night, she replayed the trial in her head, not to bask in it, but to analyze. Where could she have surged earlier? How could she shave seconds off her splits? Her obsession grew sharper, not from insecurity, but from hunger. She wanted more. Yet not everyone celebrated her rise. One evening in the locker room, as Emily laced her shoes, she overheard two seniors whispering, "She's getting cocky. Yeah, one good run doesn't make her special. Coach Harris isn't going to gamble on a freshman." Emily pretended not to hear, but the words lodged in her chest. Doubt tried to creep back in. That night, she told Reynolds about it. He listened quietly, then said, "Let them talk. Their words don't run your races, you do. Every step you take is proof. Let your feet answer, not your mouth." Emily nodded slowly. He was right. She didn't need to argue. She didn't need to explain. The track was her reply. Her chance came sooner than expected. A week later, Coach Harris announced a mixed-distance relay for practice teams of 4, each running different legs: 800 meters, 1,200 meters, 1,600 meters, and finally, a 400 meters sprint to close. To Emily's shock, Harris assigned her the 1,600 meters leg, the longest and most grueling stretch. She knew instantly what it meant. He was testing her. The lineup pitted her against one of the team's strongest distance runners, a junior who had never taken her seriously. When he heard the pairing, he smirked openly. "This'll be over quick," he muttered. Emily ignored him, but her stomach churned. This wasn't just a trial. It was a public duel. When the baton finally slapped into her hand, Emily bolted onto the track. The junior was already a few strides ahead, his form perfect, his confidence unshaken. The first lap was brutal. Her nerves screamed, her body urging her to chase recklessly. But she remembered Reynolds's mantra, patience. You'll race. She steadied her breathing, settled into her rhythm, and held her ground. By lap 2, the gap hadn't widened. The junior glanced over his shoulder, surprised to see her still there. Emily's chest burned, but she gritted her teeth, refusing to let him pull away. On lap 3, the whispers began again, only this time, they weren't mocking. They were astonished. She's keeping up. She's still there. Emily felt the pain crescendo, her legs begging for mercy. But then she thought of the laughter, the whispers, the try-it kid that had once defined her. She thought of Reynolds's words, run with the pain. And she surged. Down the backstretch of the final lap, Emily closed the gap, her strides devouring the distance. The junior's breathing faltered, panic flashing across his face. With 200 meters left, Emily pulled even. The crowd erupted, teammates shouting in disbelief. "Come on, Carter." "She's passing him." In the final curve, Emily leaned forward, every ounce of training pouring into her stride. She crossed the line a step ahead, the baton still firm in her hand. The field went silent for a heartbeat. Then cheers exploded. Emily stumbled to the infield, chest heaving, heart soaring. For the second time in 2 weeks, she had turned doubt into awe. That night, as the sun sank and the track emptied, Emily sat beside Reynolds on the bleachers. "You didn't just survive out there," he said quietly. "You controlled it." That's the difference between potential and performance. You're not a question mark anymore, Emily. You're a threat. Emily looked down at her hands, trembling with adrenaline. A threat. The word echoed in her chest, heavy and exhilarating. She wasn't the kid they mocked anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was breaking through. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The autumn air was sharp with cold, the kind that stung the lungs and made every breath feel alive. It was the morning of the invitational meet, and Westbridge's track buzzed with energy. Teams from rival universities crowded the infield. Athletes, stretching, coaches barking orders, and spectators filling the bleachers with a low hum of anticipation. For Emily, this wasn't just another race. It was the race. The trial had been her breakthrough, the relay her statement. But now, under the bright stadium lights and the watchful eyes of not only her teammates, but competitors across the state, she faced the ultimate test, the official 4,000-meter event. 10 laps. 10 brutal laps that would either cement her as more than a fluke or drag her back into the shadows of doubt. She stood at the start line, her breath fogging in the chill. Her teammates flanked her, tall and seasoned, their gazes fixed ahead. Emily tightened her laces and glanced toward the bleachers. Reynolds sat in his usual spot, coffee steaming, eyes sharp. He didn't wave, didn't smile, but the slight nod he gave her was enough. Your race, she reminded herself. Your finish. The starter raised his arm, pistol gleaming in the morning light. Bang! The field surged forward. The crowd roared. Emily's pulse spiked as adrenaline screamed for her to sprint. But she forced herself into rhythm, her strides measured, her arms steady. She let the pack surge ahead, remembering every word Reynolds had drilled into her. Patience is your weapon. Let them burn themselves out. By the end of the first lap, she was near the back. Whispers rippled through the crowd. She's lagging already. Guess the freshman hype's over. But Reynolds didn't move. He simply checked his watch, calm as ever. Emily inhaled deeply, shoulders relaxed. She wasn't chasing their race. She was building hers. Lap 3. The leaders pushed the pace, long strides hammering the track. Emily stayed steady, her breaths timed like clockwork. Each exhale melted into the rhythm of her feet hitting the ground. She thought of the mornings spent running in silence, the stopwatch in her hand, the notebook pages filled with numbers and notes. This was just another session, another 4,000 meters. Nothing more, nothing less. By lap 4, a runner in the middle pack began to falter. Emily glided past him without breaking rhythm. The whispers shifted. She's moving up. Still looks fresh. Her chest burned, but she welcomed it now. The pain was no longer an enemy. It was an old companion. Lap 6. The leaders began to show cracks. Their arms flailed slightly, their strides losing polish. Emily tightened hers, efficient and sharp, like Reynolds had taught her. She reeled in another runner, then another. The bleachers grew louder. She's climbing the pack. Coach Harris, clipboard in hand, narrowed his eyes. He had expected consistency, maybe grit, but not this. Not precision, not poise. Lap 8. The race was no longer a blur. It was a battle. 3 runners remained ahead, their lead shrinking with every lap. Emily's lungs screamed. Her legs begged for relief. But she remembered Reynolds's voice. Don't run from the pain. Lean into it. She leaned in. Down the backstretch, she surged, pulling within striking distance. The crowd gasped. The freshman was no longer chasing. She was hunting. The bell rang for the final lap. The stadium erupted, the clang of the bell echoing like a war cry. Emily's heart thundered in her chest. This was it. Everything she had endured, the laughter, the mockery, the loneliness, funneled into these final 400 meters. The lead runner glanced over his shoulder, shock flashing across his face as Emily closed the gap. Her vision tunneled. She no longer saw the crowd, the track, or the rivals. She saw only the finish line, a thin white stripe that promised redemption. "Go, Carter!" Someone shouted from the stands. Emily's legs felt like fire, each stride agony, but she refused to yield. She surged on the curve, pulling even with the leader. Their shoulders brushed. The stadium roared. For a heartbeat, doubt tried to claw its way back. "You don't belong here. You're just the kid they mocked." But then, like a shield, Reynolds's words came back to her. "They'll laugh until you run. Then they'll remember your name." Emily roared inside her own head. "Remember my name." She unleashed everything, her stride lengthening, arms pumping like pistons. The final straightaway blurred. The leader faltered, his form collapsing under the weight of fatigue. Emily surged ahead. The finish line rushed toward her, white paint against black track. The noise of the stadium became one deafening roar, and with a final desperate kick, she crossed the line. She collapsed to her knees, chest heaving, vision swimming. Sweat stung her eyes, her muscles trembling as if they might break apart. But when she lifted her head, she realized she had done it. She hadn't just survived. She hadn't just competed. She had finished first. The stadium erupted, a tidal wave of cheers. Teammates who once laughed now rushed toward her, faces lit with disbelief and awe. "Carter, that was insane. You came out of nowhere." Even Coach Harris broke his stoic mask, scribbling furiously on his clipboard before giving her a curt nod. "Well done, Carter. Well done." Emily staggered to her feet, tears pricking her eyes. Her chest still burned, her body screaming in protest, but none of it mattered. She glanced toward the bleachers. Reynolds hadn't moved, but his faint smile and small clap said everything. In that moment, Emily knew she had crossed more than a finish line. She had crossed into belonging. Later, as the stadium emptied and the adrenaline faded, Emily sat alone on the track, tracing the white finish line with her fingers. For so long, it had felt like a wall she could never break through. Now, it was proof that she could. Proof that she wasn't just the freshman joke anymore. She was Emily Carter, a runner, a competitor, a finisher. And soon, everyone would remember her name. The campus of Westbridge University buzzed with a new energy after the invitational meet. Emily Carter's 4,000-meter victory had traveled fast, spreading through the athletic center, dorms, and even the student cafe. Whispers of her feet replaced the laughter that had haunted her since her first day. For Emily, the thrill of crossing that finish line was still fresh. But what surprised her most was the ripple effect it created. She could feel it in every hallway, on every stretch of the track, and even in the locker room. People no longer dismissed her. They watched her with curiosity, respect, and sometimes awe. Even the teammates who had once mocked her now approached differently. One afternoon, as they cooled down from a grueling interval session, a senior jogged beside her. "Carter," he said, a sheepish grin tugging at his lips. "Ah, good work last week. Didn't think you had it in you." Emily paused, studying his face. For weeks, she might have felt the sting of sarcasm in those words. Now, though, she just smiled. "Thanks," she replied simply. "Keep running," he laughed, the tension in his shoulders easing, and they jogged together. No words of mockery. No doubts. Just the camaraderie of athletes pushing one another. But it wasn't only the team that changed. Emily noticed younger students, first-year athletes, who struggled through their own trials, looking her way with admiration. In the dorms, she saw them whispering, pointing to her name on the notice board with the meet results. One evening, after practice, a group of freshman girls approached her, hesitant but determined. "Emily, how did you do it?" one asked. Emily knelt down, catching her breath from her own extra laps. I trained. A lot. Early mornings, late nights, every step counts. But more than that. She paused, searching for the words. I refused to let anyone else define me. They laughed, they doubted, they mocked, but I ran my race. That's all you need to do. The girls nodded, eyes wide. Emily smiled softly. For the first time, she realized her story wasn't just about her. It could inspire others, shape their confidence, and teach them the same lesson she had learned. Persistence and belief in oneself can outshine ridicule. Her mentor, Reynolds, had always said that true champions weren't defined solely by victories. They were defined by the influence they left behind. Emily now understood what he meant. A week after the meet, Reynolds invited her to sit with him on the bleachers, the late autumn sun casting long shadows across the track. You did more than win, he said, his voice quiet but firm. You shifted the culture here. Your teammates, the freshmen, they're watching, learning. They're thinking differently about effort, about grit, about respect. You're more than a runner now. You're a legacy. Emily's chest swelled. She had never imagined it this way. Not that her victory would inspire others. Not that her perseverance would echo beyond herself. Do you really think I can change things? She asked. Reynolds smiled faintly. You already have. Keep running, keep leading, and others will follow. That's what legacies are made of. The transformation wasn't instantaneous. Some teammates still struggled to adjust to her new stature, caught between surprise and lingering old habits. But Emily didn't push. She let her running speak for her. Every lap she ran, every endurance session she completed, every record she broke quietly reminded them that effort, consistency, and courage were undeniable. By the end of the semester, Emily's name wasn't just remembered, it was respected. The once mocked freshman had become a role model, not by boastful words, but by proving that perseverance could triumph over mockery. Even Coach Harris, usually reserved in his praise, began acknowledging her openly during practice. Carter, set the pace today, he said one afternoon. I want to see if the rest of you can follow her rhythm. Emily didn't respond with pride. She simply ran, and the team followed, step by step, learning, adapting, growing alongside her. Outside the track, Emily's story began to reach beyond athletics. During a student council meeting, a classmate referenced her dedication as an example of determination and focus. At the library, younger students mentioned her triumph in casual conversation, using it as motivation to persist through challenging classes and late-night assignments. She realized that her journey from the mocked freshman to the respected athlete wasn't just about running. It was about courage, resilience, and the power of silent effort. Every extra lap, every pre-dawn training session, every painful sprint that no one saw had been worth it. And yet, despite the accolades and recognition, Emily stayed grounded. She never forgot the nights she lay awake, doubting herself. She never forgot the laughter that had fueled her resolve. And she never forgot Reynolds' lessons, patience, precision, and the strength to run her race regardless of the noise around her. One crisp evening, she jogged the track alone, twilight painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. Reynolds joined her silently, walking the bleachers. She glanced over and smiled. Another run? He asked. Emily shook her head, laughter dancing in her chest. I just wanted to remember why I started, and maybe inspire someone who's watching. Reynolds nodded, approvingly. Good. That's the mark of a true runner. Not just winning for yourself, but leaving a trail others can follow. Emily pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the familiar ache and joy of exertion. She realized that she had found more than victory. She had found purpose. Weeks later, As winter approached, the athletic center announced the formation of a mentorship program. New athletes would train with seasoned runners, guided not just in technique, but in mental strength and perseverance. And at the center of this initiative was Emily Carter. She smiled as she helped a first-year runner adjust her stride. She didn't see herself as a hero or a legend. She saw herself as someone who had run, struggled, and refused to quit. And that refusal, that relentless pursuit, had created a ripple far beyond her own races. For the first time, she didn't hear the phrase, "Try it, kid," as a taunt. She heard it as a challenge she had conquered, one that she now passed along to others. Try, persist, endure. And maybe, just maybe, in the footsteps of those who followed her, the track would remember not the mockery, but the triumph. Emily Carter had run her race, and in doing so, she had carved a legacy. And from now on, everyone would remember her name.